Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both a material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today, we're joined by an amazing couple who embody what it means to create intentional spaces in the mountains of Utah. With over 11 years of hosting experience, they've transformed a treehouse and a 1970s hand-built cabin into magical retreats that offer more than just beautiful design. They create experiences that hold space for life's tender moments. We'll explore how they discovered these unique properties, their philosophy of preservation over new construction, and the delicate balance they've found between real estate development and honoring the character of original spaces. Their approach to hospitality goes beyond business metrics, focusing instead on creating human connections and designing with purpose. From installing windows that frame perfect mountain views to replacing a planned glass floor with a hammock that became a guest favorite, their story reminds us that sometimes the most meaningful elements emerge from constraints. Whether you're curious about curating spaces that encourage disconnection from technology, handling the unique challenges of managing properties at 8,000 feet elevation, or simply creating experiences that help burnt-out travelers reconnect with nature and themselves, this conversation offers both practical wisdom and heartfelt reflection. Let's do it. Hi there.
Hi.
Oh, this is a great location. Is this one of the cabins or is this your house that you live in?
This is our house.
Wow. Okay, very, very cabin-like.
Yeah, we live on the same property as the treehouse, one of our cabins. And
yes, I saw that when I was reading some of the reviews, and folks were very complimentary of how close you live.
Yeah, But yeah, this is our house. It's a 70s A-frame.
I love it. Who is that in the background? Eating something off the counter.
This is Archer.
Archer. Hi, Archer.
Bread was being made, so he's
good job, buddy.
Scraps.
Cleaning up for you. Yeah, we have 2 dogs and a foster at all times, so our house is also full of very helpful furry creatures.
That's awesome. And your 2 current dogs, they get along fine with the fosters as you rotate them through?
Usually. Well, Bernie, our puppy, she's like 16 months old, gets along with all the fosters, and she's a great foster sister. Layla, who is on the floor behind me, I don't know if you can see her, wait, this way, is a spicy Chihuahua. So I don't know how familiar you are with Chihuahuas and their personalities, but they're more selective.
Yeah,
So we live in a house, I'm sure you can relate, but we have gates everywhere because I used to have 2 dogs who didn't get along. So it was like constant shuffling of the dogs. And we do that with her. We're pretty careful.
Yeah, our Aussies hit or miss with most dogs. It's just the nature of them. So I wish we could foster. It'd be really, really cool if we could. But
yeah,
the one eating off the counter is not a super fan of sharing anything. So
yeah, which is totally fair. She's a huge resource guarder. Yeah. Like, I feel like we want dogs to be like these perfect things that make our lives easier. And they're like whole beings with thoughts and feelings and preferences.
Totally. Our neighbor, Melissa, is a dog trainer, and we learned that mentality from her quite a few years ago. And it was such a game changer to be like, oh, right. These are living creatures. They're not something you buy and then command, even though that's what everybody thinks.
Right. I do agility now with her. And a lot of people have Australian Shepherds and have started it just because of that breed of dog. Because they're like, well, this is a working dog. I need to figure out how to work it or I'm not being fair to it.
Yeah, they need fulfillment like we do.
Exactly. Okay, I could talk about dogs all day, but I'm very excited to dive into the cabin side, especially because you all have so much experience. And as I was looking through your 2 cabins and the amount of work that you've done, there aren't a lot of people I've had on the podcast who've been hosting for 11 years. I feel like you came in with a unique space very early in the time period where that wasn't happening in a lot of places. So I'm kind of curious if you can take us back to the beginning. I have a lot of other things I want to talk about, but first I want people to understand the experience that you're bringing to this.
Yeah, I mean, we lived in San Francisco very early on when Airbnb first launched, and we used it when we were dating to travel. And we thought it was such a cool concept that you could experience the world in mostly unique ways. And what we didn't like about hotels is that it was very depersonalized. And so you got a better culture when you were in someone's home or, using something that they had built intentionally for guests.
a unique
Yeah.
curated experience,
Yeah.
which doesn't really exist as much anymore.
And
No, well, that's why this is interesting. When I saw 11 years and you have these kind of curated spaces, that was not happening quite yet in Airbnb at that time. I started a little after you, like
okay, I
9
was
years
going to say,
ago.
when did you start?
Yeah, so I started because I went to an accelerator in San Francisco and they had gone through the accelerator before me. And so our, investors talked about them and I was like, this is really cool. But it was like very early on and you were even 2 years earlier. So very early. And it feels like that was the time of, oh, I have an extra room, or oh, I'm traveling, so I'll make some money off my house. Not yet I'm buying or building specifically for this, right?
Well, we bought first with something that had already existed. So the treehouse is on our property. So this is our home.
Okay.
And then if you were to walk out the front door and you walk kind of around a big tree, which is the tree that runs through the treehouse itself, that was already built on our property. It was the reason we bought the property. The guy who owned it before us had built it for his kids. So it
Hmm.
was bare bones, not intended for adults, not intended for all of the stuff that we added to it, but
Yeah, not what it looks like now.
not what it looks like now. But when we saw it, it was an instantaneous reminder of, remember all the cool places we stayed on like our honeymoon, where we were in Italy and we were in
I was going to say our wedding because we
oh
stayed
yeah,
in
our
a
wedding
fire
too.
tower. The property we got married at in San Luis Obispo had a water tower converted to a studio with a kitchen. So
And that's where you stayed your wedding night?
yeah, it was a full
Okay.
weekend. And
That's amazing.
ever since then, we've always wanted to build a fire tower. We were looking at
Yeah.
properties and other places too to put a fire tower or just a tower house in. And when we
Yeah.
saw this and it had a tree house, we were also resource guarding like our dogs. We're like, well, if we Airbnb, we can help with the mortgage on the rest of the property.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of that and a little bit of wanting to share something so unique and so cool with all the experiences we've also done like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And that's how it feels like it starts for a lot of people. It's like, okay, I can figure out a way to make this make financial sense so that I get to enjoy it and share it with others. And then once you do that once, it kind of lights that fire and you're like, okay, wait, if I can build from scratch, I can do this even better. Is that what happened next for you, the second one you built?
it was also already built.
Okay.
We're actually big on preserving what already exists. And I think a lot of that comes from, you can tear something down and build something. I'm actually in real estate. Gianni's in real estate. And so, like, we see that a lot. And the character gets lost more frequently in
Mhm.
favor of profit or margins rather than the character.
Mhm.
It was serendipitous that we found the second cabin. It is literally two houses down from us. We had never seen it.
That's like unheard of.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it's the benefit of being in one of the firsts. Like, you have the
Yeah.
advantage of it exists, the
Yeah.
ability to purchase, the ability to Airbnb without much competition. And he was walking, we had never even seen the house because it's very hidden. And he saw someone up there and went to go find out what it was because it's so close to our property. It was kind of odd. We're pretty rural. And he met the original owner who had hand built it with his wife in the 70s.
Hmm.
And they were looking to sell. And Gianni did a great job of going like, well, we'd like to buy it because we would like to preserve the area. What's happening right now is everyone's buying, tearing down. We promise to keep the cabin. We're just going to redo the inside to make sure it's winterized.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that sold them out of the gate, and they were a lovely couple. We actually invited them back after we finished.
I was just going to ask if they've seen it.
Yeah, it came back up.
Yeah, had them stay with us so that they could experience it. And they were just like, we didn't have the resources to do this when we built it. It's really cool to be able to see it and just know that it's
Yeah.
been shared with other families. And that's the reason we also wanted it, is that the treehouse is super tiny. It's two adults. It's not safe for children. A lot of drops, floor hole, etc.
Mhm.
The hideaway gave us an opportunity to then also rent to small families or small groups of people
Yeah.
so that we could have we could provide more people with the experience that we were trying to curate, which is magic on a mountain that is rural in the middle of Utah, but also
Yeah.
close to Park City. So
Yeah. It's interesting because I talk about this a lot on the podcast. I feel, despite having built one of my properties, I feel very strongly that the direction that Airbnb and the short-term rental market is moving is
yeah,
sometimes the opposite of what like my heart tells me that I want to do or what I think the world needs more of. And it feels like the way you're approaching it is different. Yet I'm surprised to hear that you both come from real estate backgrounds, because it sometimes feels like those two might be in opposition to each other. So I'm kind of curious how you as humans have navigated that in your professional life and what you're working to do. This is also your professional life, but what you're working to do with these properties.
I guess it's kind of been a parallel path.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say we were one or the other before. Real estate happened, I guess, about 10 years ago when we were tired of waiting on other people to see our future or like make sure our
Mm-hmm.
future's taken care of from a retirement standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And we started with our house in Salt Lake, and it had an in-law underneath it, and we just kept renting it because we've always lived with someone either above us or below us since college. I don't think we've ever had a house solo. And my buddy at the time was like, you should use that and keep going, do another house like that. And he introduced me to more what the investors were doing with properties.
Mm-hmm.
That was where we started looking at other houses with duplexes or a property with
Mm-hmm.
an in-law on it. And that was really the start.
Yeah, we're not, I'm technically a realtor, but I've never sold nor bought a house with my license. I just have it for the fact that it keeps me knowledgeable about what's happening
Yeah.
in the industry for that benefit. But
Yeah.
yeah, we fell into real estate. We've always been entrepreneurs, but the real estate path was the opening of, we came from California, we couldn't afford a home. You got used to the
Yeah.
behavior that you can't afford a home, which means you will never afford a home. It's like some rarity. And when we moved to Utah, it was, yeah, you can own a home. I don't know if that's true now, but but that gave us the spark of, well, maybe we were doing it wrong. We've been giving people rent money for a really long time.
Right.
We're not getting an asset out of it. That's not really the usual
Yeah.
entrepreneurial mindset we had applied to building and scaling businesses in San Francisco. So we were like, why don't we just apply it to real estate the way everyone is telling us? And that was the light bulb from his friend.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they're just the same. It's just another business. Great.
And it's
Yeah.
been 10 years. So I don't know if these blogs are even around, but it was Mr. Money Mustache and
Yes.
Pockets back in the day.
Yes.
Like the
Rich Dad,
very
Poor
early
Dad.
on of them. Yeah.
And now they're all on like TikTok or Instagram, and that's how information's being shared.
Yes.
I think that's what I found so interesting when I was reading your pre-interview document, is that in this like loud space of bigger, faster, more money, it's really hard to force yourself to slow down. And you said a couple things that really emphasize that that's important to you and that you don't operate in the way that we're often hearing. And I've tried so hard to get voices like that on the podcast so that it is kind of almost like you go to a cabin to slow down. If you listen to this podcast, maybe we can slow down from all of the like small thing, like those things that are encouraging that grind. So I have a couple questions about that based on things that you said.
Yeah.
You said we've worn a lot of hats: team builder, space curator, plumber, marketer. And these experiences have taught us. And now there's 4 or 5 things I want to ask about. The first one, these experiences have taught us how to create hospitality that feels human. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So part of my real estate background and what I do now is I build spaces in Salt Lake City for women to feel empowered. And we do it through centering around community. And so technically we are real estate developers and landlords, but the approach and the impact that we attempt to make is to make people feel empowered. So if you have a business and you rent from us, your business scales, right? It goes small, big, it might close, it might open a second location. And we try to be really flexible with that. And that's what I think the human touch is the remembering that the the trajectory of everyone's life is not the same. It's also never going to be linear. So if you can remember that this person has a different trajectory at a different pace, they might be at a high right now or a low right now versus this person, you treat each thing as an individual because it is actually an individual.
Yeah.
And if you make that connection to the person and understand where they're coming from, it's really hard to not come up with a solution that works for both sides. So in hospitality, it just feels like, well, who are we building for? What are they looking for? What do they need that maybe they don't know that we have experience or wisdom on that we can add in. And so with cabins, most people are coming from a city to get away. So there's things that they know that they want. They want to be leisurely, so they want a TV. But we don't put a TV in the bedroom because we want to emphasize, sure, watch TV, that's fine. We're not going to, completely derail your life. But when you're going to sleep, when you're outside on the deck, we don't have music. We don't have the TV because your job is to connect with nature. And we're just inviting you to experience that potential opportunity, even if it's only for 30 seconds, because that's all you can stand and you got to go back and watch TV.
Yeah.
But
That's why we pick small TVs too.
Yeah.
For our sons also.
Yeah.
But just like every little piece being, who is it? What do they want? What do they maybe not know that they want? And then being able to try to infuse all of those pieces together the best we can.
Yeah.
And with your marketing background, knowing the customer too, because sometimes when pricing is really high, you get a different type of customer, or if pricing is really low, different type of customer. So we've worked really hard to curate the type of customers we want that work with us, because there's a lot. I think what people don't realize with Airbnb is there's a lot of people who probably should have a hotel.
Yes.
Or not.
I think anyone listening can understand that. So how do you do that? Because when you were describing those different experiences, I love the idea of curating for specific people, but anyone who's hosted knows that you're going to get feedback from all the people who have different thoughts on how it should be. And you have to be confident in who you are and the experience you're creating to be able to know when to say no to feedback and not just be like, oh, you want this, I'm going to do all of it to make everyone happy.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? How did you figure out who are the people you want, and how do you tailor the prices in order to attract those people?
I really think that is the marketing background that I could probably talk on for forever. But my primary job is strategy, and most of it comes from a marketing background where if you're taught really well, it is, who are you serving? Because whatever your product or service is actually for someone else. The best product or service is if you also want the same thing, and then it's really natural alignment. So if I don't wear makeup and I work for a makeup company, it's going to be really hard for me to understand that customer. So it's probably close to impossible because you're always guessing.
Right.
For us, when we decided to rent our cabins, it was, well, who are we imagining? It was us in our 20s, trying to get away from burnout, trying to get away from 80 hours a week at a startup.
Yeah.
And it was really easy to imagine, what would I want and who that person looks like and is. And then we had to take wisdom from other people who were typically older, that it was like, well, what should we be looking for in these spaces? Because our instinct is not always correct. And so I think the best thing to do is to take, first and foremost is to think about what you want, really craft a very specific avatar or person around that, so you can get an idea of what it is. It's probably going to be you. Like that's a typical, that's why companies get started.
Okay.
Do best in their own space.
We know those clients best.
Right? And yeah, that's because you don't have to guess. You just know the answer so intuitively. And then from there, stepping outside yourself to recognize that you have a limited belief system. You need information from other people. So go find your version of yourself in hopefully 20 years, someone you aspire to imagine. Where am I going to head if I'm like burnt out? I want to get out of the city. I want to relax, but I don't know how. Who's the 20-year-old something older that's like, they look relaxed? Whether they are or not is irrelevant. Take their feedback. And then I also think with feedback in general, it's just sitting in it. You're going to get it from all sides. Just sit in it and ask yourself if it aligns with the person you're imagining, the goal you want. It's the reaction that's fast. That's where we get into the spin of giving and giving and giving without intention behind what you're trying to do. And that's how you can deviate really quickly from your original intention.
Yes.
We've had plenty of people ask us for TVs. Never added one. So
yeah, we do the same thing. We don't have a TV at all. And we have only gotten this, and we've only gotten feedback once that they wanted it. They were coming for Thanksgiving. So I think hopefully that means we're communicating well why there's not one there, but it is still a fear of mine all the time. Will someone get there and then be disappointed that there isn't one. And that's where I've had to sit with, what are we trying to create? And is that aligned with it? Well, no, it's not,
Yep.
but we do have high speed internet because I have a dream that someone will write a book there one day. And I'm like, well, you need internet to do work.
Yeah.
So that, and if you need it to watch whatever, you could do that.
Well,
But a TV
also,
doesn't do that.
I love that you said that the you communicate up front, which is probably a piece I also should have mentioned. You try your best to communicate up front why you don't have a TV or what the experience you're trying to create is. I think if you read our description, you get a really good indicator of we're here for you to disconnect. We're here for you to connect with nature. We're here for you to do. And the people who don't want that, chances they might read, they might not read, and then we have a problem. But most of them we don't end up with because we communicate so well up front about what you're going to
Yep.
get.
Our boundaries are pretty well established too
Yeah.
in the Airbnb descriptions.
So like we've never said yes to a kid at the treehouse because we live on the property. We're worried about the dogs and the safety and
Yeah.
the noise. And so even
Yeah.
if I want the money, it doesn't matter. The answer is
Yeah.
no, because it's more aligned with what we're trying to create.
Yeah. And that, I think, because boundaries are hard for a lot of people, myself included, and I've done a lot of work on that. Yeah. And I think having a very, very clear why is the trick to creating boundaries that you will actually stick to. And anytime I've created a boundary that I find myself making multiple exceptions to, I'm like, wait, I must not be clear on the why for this boundary. Because when you said that about the dogs, that's so clear, right? Like, these dogs are not going anywhere, and I want to keep everyone safe and happy. This would not work. That totally makes sense. Boundary respected, right?
And also boundaries are hard because we typically put boundaries on other people. And really a boundary comes from you, something you can control, because you can't control what the other person's going to do. So it's even more complicated. No wonder we're still struggling with it. I don't think we're ever going to like figure it out, but you just work harder and harder towards, can I control what I'm asking, or am I asking someone to do something for me? That's not going to get the same result either. So yeah, the why, and then knowing what you can and can't control.
Years in, this is the smoothest year we've had ever with chains accessing in the winter to our place. And it was because we reframed how our boundaries were.
Oh, and they're so clear on your website and on the listings. So clear.
Sometimes
like,
still not clear enough. You'd be surprised.
I know.
Never clear enough.
I know. I always read reviews too, because I feel like that gives me a really helpful view of the place. And they were mentioned in multiple places, but the one I loved most was someone who was like, it was hard for us because it was our first time, but perhaps it taught us a life skill that we'll use in the future. And I was like, love that mindset, because that's not always what you hear.
These are the people we want.
Yep.
These are the people we go after. So we use words like adventure and, learning curve and a rare experience that you might be frustrated, like trying to bring up all the reality of the emotions that come with
living at 8,000 feet.
Yeah.
Traveling.
Not just
you also said that
experience and it's going to be perfect. That's not real.
I liked when you were talking about chains, you did mention multiple times, like, this is what it takes to experience 8,000 feet. And right. And even just that framing is like, oh yeah, to experience really cool and unusual things, it's not going to be right next door, or it wouldn't be cool and unusual. Yeah. So it's going to take a little bit of extra work in order to experience it. That's what we're providing for you.
It's funny too, because most of the times that we have a hiccup with snow chains, it's a couple, and we come in to recover the vehicle that is stuck because they didn't put on the chains, and they're always so frustrated and mad at each other, and the wife will come out typically and go, I told him to put on the chains and he didn't listen. And our primary job at that space is actually not to recover the car. It's to help them process, like, this is a new experience. You guys did a good job. You're not the only ones to get stuck. Life is hard. This is hard.
Team recoveries are better. There's the human aspect that needs to be managed, and one of us choose to talk to the people while the other one is doing the recovery and solving the chain issue.
This is such a value of having you on site, because I'm just thinking, I'm so far away from my properties, and that human side is the most important part. And I feel like in the startup world, we used to say, because obviously you guys know, you've worked in startups, like, there's so many things that go wrong at the beginning. Like, technology breaks all the time. You're building it as you go. And my advisor used to always say, these are opportunities to delight. because what they do is they put, every time something goes wrong, it puts you in contact and face to face with the customer.
Yep.
And you have an opportunity for them to leave being like, wow, that experience was great.
Yep.
And a lot of us as hosts don't get that, but you all get that with the snow tires. You have this like intimate opportunity to help like repair their relationship almost going into this vacation.
To learn by failure and doing at the same time over
Yeah.
years.
I mean, we only know how to help because we've been stuck in our car and screaming at each other because we're, stressed about whatever it's happening. And it was like, oh, it's like a moment of reflection. This that we're seeing, that's us, honey. What would we have
Yeah.
liked if someone
Yeah. Yep. As you were describing it, I was like, I could see Sean and I being in this exact same situation, yelling at each other about why we didn't put them on. Okay. Your experiences have also taught you how to weave a narrative into a space that when a traveler walks in, they don't just see beautiful design, they feel something. Tell me more about that.
A lot of inspiration drawn from our travels and what we want when we go into a space. So this is kind of us being the customer.
Yeah.
Was a big start. So we've always used a lot of decorations from our own. Like, as you can see, our house is decorated the same way as our Airbnbs
Yeah.
because that's how we wanted them to be. And it was easier enough to not come up with someone else's style. It was just our style.
Yeah.
We went in there.
Because that's what's happening a lot. I guess that's my push on this one, is that in the world of Instagram and showing you want a space that looks beautiful, but that doesn't always translate to making you feel something when you're there. So how have you figured out which of these design elements actually evoke the feeling that you want and not just beautiful Instagram pictures?
I think our mountain has a lot of magic that we get to piggyback off of. So we have that advantage.
Yep.
You come here and we have moose, elk, tons of birds, a ton of wildlife that are more, mammal and ground based. And that gives us an up. So first and foremost, they get the credit for it. But I think
Location.
location.
Yeah.
I think the big thing is probably that when we created a mood board, it was quite literally a mood board. It wasn't a design board. It wasn't a style board.
Yeah.
So it was, we want someone to feel relaxed. We want someone to sleep well and feel rested. We want someone to feel, for the treehouse in particular, romantic, because it's for two adults and typically we get a couple. And so it was, how do we build and design to get romance? It was twinkle lights, and it was things that, from, like Gianni mentioned, our travels that made us feel really romantic, like cafe lights when we were in Italy on our honeymoon and we were next to the water and you could hear the water and you could hear the sound of people and things around you and not music and not anything else. And we felt like, well, that was romantic. How do we make it romantic in the same way for our version?
Yeah. And then when we were also designing the treehouse, obviously when you're outside of the treehouse, you want to be in the treehouse. But once you're in the treehouse, the whole focus and everything is set up to be looking outside of the treehouse. It's to be in nature.
Yeah.
Our house is the same way. Like, we're sitting here staring at trees and mountains because that's where we want to spend our time. So the treehouse, once you're in, there's enough from the outside on the inside because you're entering a wood. And then once you're in there, all you have is 270 of view. On the hideaway, which is down the street, when we redid that, we made the whole front side windows so that when you stood at the bottom of the staircase, you could see every beam. It's like looking up into a forest, every beam of the A-frame, and even put a glass wall on the front of the bed so that there's nothing hiding looking into that building. But once you're in that building, all you see is the outside and windows. So everything was to draw you in, and then once you were in, to engage you with nature on the outside.
Yeah. Which is like really the epitome of cabin life, is that you can be warm inside and cozy, but feel like you're still connected to nature when you're inside. And that's where I feel like people miss when they're looking at other Instagram things and they're making a mood board, to your point, really a design board.
Yeah.
What they often miss are these like bigger design pieces, what materials you're using that make you feel a certain way, the amount of windows, where they're pointing, where you position it on the property, if you have that choice, are like big choices with a long lasting impact that you can't change over time, like a paint color.
And like the hideaway, It was the glass wall for the bedroom upstairs and the window replacement that changed that place, I'd say. And they weren't the cheapest, but it also wasn't the most expensive part of that. It was committing to the vision of transparency in the whole
Yeah.
A-frame.
Which
Yeah. And
luxury, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go.
I was going to say it comes with the luxury of time and
Yeah.
scope. And so how to figure that out and how to balance it. We actually renovated the Hideaway in 4 months, which is a really quick turnaround because we went all the way down to the studs. But we didn't touch anything in it until the vision had been created. So I think the patience to like not produce, not get right into it, and just sit in the uncomfortable feeling of I don't know what it's going to look like, and I'm going to run out of time, and we won't have enough time to do any of these things.
And sometimes the plan changes.
Ignore all of that. Yeah.
The hammock floor was supposed to be a glass floor originally on that property until we saw the pricing on a glass floor. And it ended up being the hammock because of pricing, but it also ended up being better than a glass floor because people spent most of their time there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a good thing where I was looking at like a brutalist design of glass everywhere. And that wouldn't have been as comfortable as being able to sit on a hammock and stare out the window all day.
Right. I'm so glad you shared that because I do think some people listening might hear us talk about windows and all these design choices and think, but I have the luxury of a huge budget, right? And so that's such a good example where the vision didn't change. The vision was transparency.
Yes.
We want to be able to see between the two.
Yes.
But there were multiple ways to do that, some which might be less expensive.
And if you keep the windows on the front of that, sorry about that. If you look at the windows on the front of that A-frame, they're all standard size windows. We wanted custom ones that matched the pitch and came down. And again, you looked at the price and like, we'll have to pick a bunch of 4x6s and 2x3s to get those space filled up as much as possible. And that's what we had to do because we're all constrained by that in some way.
That's right. That's right. And I think sometimes that can make people feel like they don't have choices. So I love your example. You do have choices. And it's just thinking about what am I trying to create and what are the multiple ways that I can create it?
Only because you said why earlier, and that's big for me. There is a great book by, I want to say Simon Sinek. I might be saying his last name, start with why. It's a really good resource.
I love that book.
I figured you did because you knew exactly what it was, that this why, if you just keep coming back to it and the real reason, everything is always a choice and everything is always hard, but it's really easy when you know the why. All of the, the distractions or anything that blinds you or makes you feel frustrated, it just falls away because you go, well, that's not in alignment. So good. Nope.
And that's where we've always worked well together because she's come at it from the marketing. I've always been a product manager or on the side. So I always would touch from concept to finished, and you had to know the why. We always had to work together on the why and work together on the why. So if anyone strays, like that's why we're doing it.
Yeah. This is so funny because my twin sister is a product manager who does that. And I am in marketing. And so we love talking about this stuff because it applies to so much of what we do. He also has a TED Talk on that for those listening.
Yes.
I mean, read the book, but if you can't read the book, there's also a TED Talk on it that covers a lot of it that could be really valuable. I'll try and remember to link it in the show notes. We'll see. If I don't, feel free to shoot me a DM and I will send you the link. If you're dreaming about a cabin build or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. Okay, I still have a couple more on that list, but I'm going to come back to them because one of my other questions, you said what it means to create and manage spaces that hold people in real tender moments, the burnout, the beauty, the identity shifts, the quiet wins that no one sees. And I felt emotional when I was reading that because I came from the world of education, specifically like working to close the achievement gap, and have struggled ever since I left to find my why, like the real purpose in what I'm doing, especially in this space that where I see it talked about in other places, it doesn't feel mission driven. It doesn't feel like there's a clear why other than money, right?
Yeah.
And you said that and I was like, okay, it feels like these folks have like a real sense of purpose in this work. And I'd love for you to share that just for anyone else. I think a lot of folks listening probably have a strong sense of purpose. Maybe it's just me. But what you were just saying about the why and like understanding why you do it matters so much in all the small details. So I guess, how have you resisted the building more, the maximizing profits, and the next big thing to really zoom in on those tender moments and what you're doing for the folks staying there?
Recognizing it's us who's burning ourselves out and not someone else, first and foremost.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, I was going to say failure, just like how he said it earlier. We had to build and burn out in order to recognize what build and burnout was and to know it felt bad and
Yeah.
terrible. To then reflect and recognize that, well, what are the things that feel great? And none of them were ever more money. None of them were ever more responsibility. None of them were ever more. It was actually distilling it down to the very few things that were, I want to spend time with my husband and I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to make impact on women specifically in my career. And who cares how much money we make? If we're not doing that, the money we will always chase. I'd
Yeah.
rather chase a dream that feels like I'm actually winning rather than
Yeah.
a dream where someone else is telling me you won and
Yeah.
you haven't actually.
Yeah.
Because they're never going to tell you that. No one's
Yeah.
ever going to tell you
It's
you're winning.
Yeah.
finding a balance strategy, because we realized a lot of our friends are older and everyone waits until they're older to slow down because it's partially tied to money. So if you can control the money out and have some control over the money in, and then control ourselves, not burning ourselves out, because when you're younger, you always blame the person who's running the company for burning you out
Yes.
until you're running your own company and burning yourself out.
Then it's
Yeah. The worst.
realize the reality of life.
Wow.
I can tell you, building the Hideaway, we were burnt out for
Yep.
about a year and a half because we were
Yeah.
working 40 to 60 hours a week at our regular jobs and another 30 to 40 in the Hideaway every week. And we were fried. As soon as winter hit, we were like useless people for 6 to 8 months
And it took
and
the
didn't
joy.
do anything else. Yeah, it took the joy out of it.
And so
Yeah.
that was well, what are we even trying to do?
Yeah.
Are we going to burn ourselves out to give a small family an escape? That might be worth it. But what we were doing was trying to race the clock to make money, to make money back on the investment, to like
Not lose more money. And
so that was
Yeah.
the wrong path. And we're thankful that, we completed the task, but we lost track of what we were doing it for. And
Yeah.
therefore it didn't feel good for a really long time.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
thankfully back to like feeling the way we had intended. Watching people go up there and enjoy it is amazing. But yeah, I think it's just the constant reflection, and you learn by failing.
And being
Yeah.
in an environment like this at 8,000 feet, the winters are not something you get to slack off on. And you have to have a lot of money to not have to worry about it. And most
Yeah.
people, unless you're somewhere else in Park City, you can't buy that kind of service up here. So you have to learn to love just sitting in the tractor and moving snow
Yeah.
for a few
Yeah.
hours a day when it's snowing all the time. And that's part of the experience for us as well as the guests. People come up and they're frustrated that they might be stuck behind a tractor for the next 20 minutes that's
Yep.
clearing a 1-lane road. Like, you're only up here because of that tractor, so
That's right.
enjoy the snowfall.
Yeah. Welcome to the local experience.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's a teachable moment for everyone a lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this brings me to my next question. So I used to work in data as well, especially when teaching. We did a lot of like data analysis. And so a quote that I have written on my wall that I think about all of the time is we value what we measure and we measure what we value.
Mm.
And so I think one of the pieces that I struggle with in this part of my life, the short-term rental space, is the how you measure success.
Mhm.
Because the typical ways that folks are measuring success in this space and against each other, if that's your mindset, is like, oh, what's your occupancy? What's your occupancy? What's your monthly revenue? What's your highest month ever? Like, what are your profit margins, right? Like, because they're numerical, it makes sense.
Yep.
What are your reviews? Oh, 4.98 or whatever, right? It's all these, we're used to like this numerical measures of success. But the way that you're talking about this, creating spaces that hold people in real tender moments, right? Like how how do we measure that success?
That's funny because that quote's one of my favorites. I always say what gets measured gets managed from my engineering
Mm,
background.
same idea.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I don't know. We used to be black and white at chasing numbers. If it wasn't 100%, it was a failure. And that was back to our burnout comment.
Yeah. I
But
mean, I'm struggling with that now. We've been at 100% for 4 years and this is the first month we're not. But it sounds like folks everywhere are struggling with that and with occupancy right now. But I've been working really hard to be like, Janice, you're not doing this. We never have started doing this for the money. We got lucky that it did well. And so now I'm grappling with this of like, okay, then stop looking at those numbers. If that's not what you care about, then stop looking at those numbers. But what do you turn to? I mean, the guest book, but I'm just curious how you all talk or think about this.
Well, I think that if you're running a business, if this is actually for business, you got to measure all the things you said. So let's
Yeah.
assume that you're doing that and then put it in a
Yeah.
box.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to invalidate any of those numbers.
Mhm.
You need them
That's a really good point.
to make.
Like, I don't want to assume that everyone has the luxury of like, I don't need to have good occupancy or make profit.
Yeah, it goes back to the why, right? Like we
Yeah.
need our treehouse to some degree at the beginning to have paid our mortgage and helped
Yeah.
pay for it.
pay
So like
expenses, grow equity. It's pretty
that,
much all the baseline
Yeah.
of that business is.
all of that mattered. If you do have the luxury of, and hopefully you do, because hopefully not everything that you do in business is just for money. That would be really sad. So hopefully, in addition to that, I would say that the ways in which you measure it are, again, you go back to the why, but you think about if I were the person, how would I measure success? If I was the guest, what would they
Mm,
say is valuable?
yeah.
So it can be time with family that is interrupted. Uninterrupted. It can be a celebration of a graduation. It can be a bucket list item to have been able to travel, whatever. And I think the way in which we do that is we ask a lot of questions about our guests for why they book up front. So there's
Mm,
always the reviews, which are fascinating, but it's reflection. It is not intention.
yeah.
The beginning statement of tell us what brings you to our cabin. What are you looking to experience? Who are you bringing with you? Tell us
Mm,
what's up, basically.
You're helping them curate their experience before it
I
even
love
starts.
that.
And we get to learn a lot about I'm coming with my husband. We haven't been able to travel for 2 years because he just had surgery. It's been a really hard, long road. I measure now if they had a great stay, it's not just a 5-star review. It is that I gave or we gave that couple an opportunity to connect
Yeah.
offline for the first time in 2 years at the
Yeah.
level that they dreamed of.
Yeah.
And it's anecdotal, but those anecdotals, you start seeing patterns in them
Yeah.
and you can start figuring
Yeah.
out measurements of success. So one of
Yeah.
ours is how many celebrations do we do a year?
Mm,
And that helps me keep track of like if we host about 1,000 guests a year, how many of them are celebrating? We have about 70% celebrating.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we create a space for people to celebrate their tender moments. That's our measurable.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
Soft
Yeah.
measurables.
Marketing measurables.
I know that's what's so hard is that the data analysis analyst in me is like, those are soft. It's like, right. But then the human in me with a heart is like, there was one guest book entry that I'm sure I've mentioned before. I'm sorry if folks have already heard this, but it was this couple who had fostered kids for like the last 20 years. And they said this was their first trip without kids. And they said we stayed up until like 2 a.m. and we have a library in the loft that we've curated with recommendations in our guest book. And they said we stayed up late in the middle of the night reading books out loud to each other in front of the fire. And that is the one, again, soft measurable, but that is the one that I always think about when I think about, because there's so many moments that you don't know are happening, that they don't share with you, that they never write in the guest book, right? But then occasionally when they share things that personal and vulnerable, it reminds you of, okay, just because I'm not hearing every time doesn't mean that those moments aren't happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is,
I think
it's in the private moments. Like a tender moment is often
Yeah.
not public.
Yeah,
Very public through social media now, but really the really intimate ones are not. And
that's right.
that's why I like to ask up front, because
Yeah.
it's not in the moment, but I get to see where their mind is, why they chose our location.
Yeah.
And then honestly, I just imagine what they're doing. Like,
Yeah.
I would imagine something like that of, oh, they're probably snuggling right now.
We've always trip plan travel around big life events too, birthdays and other things, so that we remember was associated with it.
Milestones, so that when our memory fades, we can go like, in 1997.
When it currently is already.
But also that's like research. Like you are experiencing what it feels like to be somewhere special for an event, which is what you're doing for other people.
Yep.
Yeah, we went to a great Airbnb for a wedding of a friend of ours, and she had freshly baked cookies. This was 2009, like really early Airbnb.
Oh, early.
We showed up and there were fresh baked cookies and a bottle of wine and a little card that
the
said
most
welcome.
Texas thing ever.
And that was what catapulted us into, I want a personalized sign for every single person that comes through our space. I want them to know that this was built for them during their time that's here. We always leave little snacks, because it's like, I just remember being like, freshly baked cookies. Like, I can't do that for them. They don't want my cookies. They'd be burnt and gross, but
or I'm starving by the time I arrive somewhere and I just need a bite.
The feeling of like consumption of, you're taking in all the good of the space around you. Yeah. And then for celebrations, I just remember going to a hotel one time and they had like this really nice little note that they had surprised us with to say happy anniversary. And I was like, how did they know? Oh, that's right. They asked me and I've forgotten, but it didn't matter in that moment. It was, how did they know I feel so special? And so we give champagne glasses and apple cider so that people can just have a moment.
Okay, but also I've heard
not our demographic.
We actually get the small ones here too. So
true.
Oh, really?
Limitations of supply chain at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. But this reminds me of Will Guidera's book, Unreasonable Hospitality. Have you read it?
I have not.
Oh my God, you would love it.
Yeah,
everything you're saying is like, I mean, you could have written it, but he's also telling his life story. So it's still worth reading. And it's about a restaurant. So it's slightly different. We did a whole episode on it a while ago with Spencer, but part of it is, how do we create these moments of unreasonable hospitality where people are just like, and part of the question that Spencer and I grappled with was like, but how do we find out about the things? How do we get the information ahead of time so that we can then curate these really personal experiences? And I think to your point, that's where the pre-questions at the beginning. Do you find that like 100% of the people answer them?
I mean, 99%, yes.
Wow. Okay.
And most of the time, the people who don't, they're literally struggling with the app. So maybe a little bit older. Like they didn't understand the concept. But then they're like all in once they see us and they're like, oh my gosh, so let me tell you the whole story. Because I think that's where Airbnb really started, was they wanted to create connection in addition to space exchange. They've moved really far from that, which is a great example of like going away from your why. Everybody feels it. You might get stuck and you might not see it, but the rest of the world is seeing that you are deviating from your why. But we want to keep the connection because it's the best part.
My God. It's like why so many of us, especially old school hosts, started. So I'm actively, some people know this, but I'm actively pitching Airbnb right now on a marketing campaign that's story driven about hosts, because that's why I started hosting. And I'm a filmmaker in my full-time job. So that's why I want to combine the two. But that's where I think, and if you listen, Brian Chesky was on a podcast recently, and in it, he was talking, I think it was the Optimism podcast or something, but he was talking about that being part of the roots and still being part of what they do. And I was like, okay, good. You still believe that, but your marketing message is not communicating that in the ways that it did back at the beginning. because that is what makes it special.
Kind of went back to it by doing like celebrity one-off homes or like unique curated, but
I'm
it's
so mad
not
about those.
personalized.
Right. And
It's
they're always sold out. It was like, this is no one's actually experiencing this.
yep,
Like,
unattainable.
and yeah, and also we have hosts like you guys all over who are doing this every day for average people and creating not average experiences for them. So cool that these celebrities are hosting like one person, but like I kind of want to hear about your stories, right? And maybe the podcast has done that to me because I've met so many people
Oh, I'm
who
sure.
are doing cool things and I'm like, well, we need more of these stories because that's what makes it different.
They were
Totally.
doing that up until 2021, 22. They would do, each area had like the best hosts or the best, most viewed or most saved. And that kind of went away, didn't it?
But that's also not telling their story. So we did one sample film. I want to know about the humans so that even if I'm not meeting them, like, why did they create this treehouse? What is the intentionality that you all are putting into it? Like, understanding the heart behind it, I think, informs buying decisions. I don't know, Rocky. You probably know better than me. You've been in marketing your whole career, but it feels like
We know what
that's
we're talking about, so keep going.
yeah, it just feels like that's how people are making decisions about where they spend their money right now, and Airbnb is missing the boat on it. But I think the heart is there. It's just there's something missing in marketing. Anyway, we don't have that much more time, and I have like 5 more questions for you.
Okay, we'll keep it short on
Okay,
our end. We're chatty.
so this is the one that I think will be most helpful for people. You wrote, I can't stop my brain from distilling complex problems into more simplistic elements to build a process around them. And this seems like an invaluable skill in the world of hospitality, which is hard alongside well thought out and executed systems. So I'm hoping you can share, like, maybe just a couple examples that have been game changing for you all in doing this, especially with intentionality that folks might be able to benefit from.
I don't know if I can give a specific example. Maybe you have one in your head, but I feel like it's mostly the making space for yourself to think through a problem
Mm,
holistically, because you're always going to start more granular than you really need to be at, because you're
mm,
in something. But that's not how dreams started. You had a dream that had nothing, it was not tethered to anything. You just had an idea.
mhm.
And your brain has the ability to take that idea and, if it's a balloon, pop it and get rid of it and make it, like, that's not real. But it also has the ability to just let it kind of hang out in the air for a while. It's not going to run out of helium instantaneously.
Yeah.
But we have this fear, like you said earlier, that, well, if I don't do something with it right now, if I don't have the answer right now, if I don't do it right now, you lose it in some way.
It's having the why.
And it's finding the why
Finding the why.
that takes
Mhm.
space.
I know one quick example. When we were doing the hideaway, I never got a chance to finish caulking some of the baseboards, and it drove me crazy. And then after like 6 months to a year, it was like, it doesn't change the reviews. It's not affecting
Yeah.
the house.
Yeah.
And it's
I
like
know
a
that.
tab that was getting picked at me until I realized we succeeded at the experience.
Yeah.
Let that go.
Yeah.
But I
Because
think
you'll focus on those little things too much.
yeah, and I think the complexity comes out of chaos. And so the idea of making space is to let the noise happen. Don't try to stop it, but then be quiet enough to hear the important pieces and put those together. That's what's simple in the complexity, but you have to make
Yeah.
space to hear it.
We also like
Yeah.
letting things fail before we try to fix them.
Yeah,
As of late, yep.
experimenting and seeing what's actually,
Oh.
a problem. But
But that's really scary for a lot of people because this thing that like hangs over us of like, oh no, I'm gonna get a 4-star review, God forbid. And like it's terrifying to feel like, so how do you approach that with confidence that it actually isn't gonna impact the business, but we'll just learn from it and grow?
big picture again,
Yeah.
I mean, it comes from practice. It's not that, like, out of the
Yeah.
womb it was just like, oh, I have this concept of big picture and now I can just use it. It's paying attention to all the reminders of, I think, looking backwards and keeping track and mindfulness about what has worked, because the negative will always outweigh the positive. And so
Yeah.
if you're not actively recording in some way what you're doing well, the 5-star reviews are not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what you feel like you're doing well that aligns you with your why. those little
Yeah.
voices that are negative will be screaming voices at you, and you'll
Yeah.
forget all the positive. It's
Yeah.
literally how our brains are wired. So you're
Yeah.
screwed unless you put up a boundary for yourself that's, I will sit in this negativity, feel what it feels like, and wait before I do anything with it.
Yes. Yes.
That's a great one. Or I will today think about what are all the things that went well in the last month for my business and for my guests and my why. What happened that I should remember? And go back and read that. And it is a guest book is a great example of that, but it's from someone else. It's not you
Mm.
manifesting it. So you don't take the same level of ownership out of it as you do if you were to, okay, what are we doing well? And celebrate those little milestones.
That is so good for me to hear because I feel like if I'm validating myself, it's not as valuable because this is the people pleaser, right? If other people are happy, then it's more valid. So I seek my
Yes.
reinforcement of that by like I will screenshot nice messages that people send and I have them in a folder on my phone called Smiling Heart. And I'll read that sometimes if bad things happen to remind myself it's okay. That's not like all of them, but that's still about other people validating me instead of me being grounded in my belief that what I'm doing is good. That's so good. I feel
You
like
should
everybody
be
needs
really
to hear
proud of the library idea. I love that idea, but you should love it the most because you got to create what
that.
you had intended to create. That's the
Yeah.
bigger win. Me
Yeah.
liking it is icing. You
Yeah.
being able to have
Mm.
created what you
Mhm.
loved and what you wanted, and it became three-dimensional manifestation of it.
Yeah.
That's you. That's not us
Yeah.
or any guest.
Okay, this is such a good mindset shift for me selfishly, but hopefully for other folks listening. Cuz I feel like especially women that's what a lot of us need to hear. My people pleasing takes over in so many places and hospitality is a great place for us and a really hard place for us.
Yes, feedback
For
is
that same
huge.
reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think this is why I do think the time thing is real because I think I like talking to hosts who've been at it for a while because the four-star review becomes way less scary when you've gotten one,
That's
survived,
absolutely
and moved
right.
on.
We had a
Well,
very
the
specific situation around that
the
recently.
Airbnb thing with the 5 star is the only way to get Superhost basically is
Yeah,
so unfair. And that
yeah,
is an actual unfair thing to put on hosts. Is way too much
yeah,
pressure because
yeah.
unrealistic.
Oh, and the value barometer to me needs to go because when we're talking about data, the way that they phrase that question,
Mhm.
like, did you get a great deal? Wait a minute. I'm not trying to give anyone a great deal.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm trying to give them an incredible experience, and to do that, it's going to cost more money. Like, I don't know the way they phrase it, but that's a whole nother
very
conversation.
strong point though. I agree a whole 100%. But keep going.
Yeah. Okay. So my last question. So when I used to train teachers, one of the things we would do is we'd go into classrooms and we'd make a list of start, stop, and keep. And I love that way of giving feedback because it reiterates that some things you're doing great. Keep doing that. Like don't stop doing that. But also some things you still need to learn and some things you need to unlearn. So
Yep.
I'm curious, you've been doing this for a while and you're bringing a lot of experience to the table. So maybe give us one, the biggest area of growth you've experienced over your 11 years of doing this. And then two, the biggest area of unlearning or things that you had to like undo from past experiences that have made you more successful at this.
Funny, that's our favorite employee review method.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yes. I think it's just really concise and easy and like
Yeah.
digestible, and it focuses on big picture. Because
Yep.
if you do it well, you go like really high level.
Yeah.
I want to. Do you have one?
Go for it. Are you struggling for one?
I'm not struggling. I have a lot of feedback for myself at all times. So
I think reframing the way we managed Airbnbs rurally through the winter and summer months and those difficulties was something that we greatly changed over the last 10 years.
Mm.
we used to tell people you have to have chains or you get kicked off, and that was a example of a boundary that we're putting on someone else to uphold
Ah,
on our behalf. Instead of you will get stuck if you don't have chains, but they're your choice.
yeah.
What happens in that
Here's
case?
what happens if you don't have them.
So
Yeah.
being better hosts, I think, would be the biggest change for me.
Yeah, I mean we never hosted anyone before this, so the continuation of constantly evolving as individuals and how we show up for other people when they are our guests is, yeah, I mean, huge.
Because we see a lot of other Airbnbs turn over property managers, third party managers, especially where we live. And if your heart isn't in it and the person who's managing isn't in it, you're not going to give anyone that experience.
That's right.
That's why we want to keep it still as small and curated as possible.
Yeah.
And then I would also say our continual stop, because we're in a business, so like our income relies on a variety of different businesses that we have. It's really hard not to think of money as a scarce resource, but but we're constantly trying to remind ourselves that it's not about slashing prices, it's not about making exceptions, it's not about, and it goes back to the why. I mean, I hate to be so boring and repetitive, but like it goes back to the why, but it also comes from a place of, if money wasn't the driver, what decision would I make?
Mm.
And every time you make a decision from that space, you end up with more money. Even though your brain is going, no, you won't. No,
Yeah.
you won't. In the short term, maybe not. But in the overall long term, we have been hosts for so long now. And it's because we keep trying to choose the experience, the people over the money. And that's not a good job, you did it. It is a continual unlearning. So I don't even know which one to really put that in, besides probably continue trying really hard
Yeah.
at remembering that.
Whenever
piece.
we would stop, we'd make a bad choice because we were worried about money versus our overall picture.
Yep.
What a good reminder to finish on right now in this environment, because I do feel like a lot of people are feeling the pull of like oversaturation.
Yep.
Everyone's worried about the economy and the uncertainty of it. And so I think that's probably top of mind for a lot of people, myself included. And so reminding yourself to not make decisions during this time that don't rely on like why you're doing what you're doing is so valuable.
Because you will be scared. It is actually scary. It is very scary, particularly right now. And the instinct is to work from, well, now we're in competition with one another.
Yes.
That's not going to work either. Now we're in competition with money. Now we're in competition. It's not. It's about leaning into it, but just give yourself space to actually feel the fear, because it's real. That's not untrue.
Yeah.
It's then what are you going to do with it is going to make a big difference.
Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for taking this time to chat with me. This was super helpful, and I really enjoyed meeting both of you.
It was so nice to meet you, Janice.
Thanks so much for joining us, and if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.